I really just want somebody who's going to aggressively fight for me in court. Is that too much to ask?
Filing my cases shouldn't be that difficult. There's got to be an easier way.
Nothing frustrates me more than having to wait for my attorney to call me back. I need them now.
What I really need from my law firm is someone who can provide my staff training so we actually can stay out of trouble.
When you have property management problems, we have your solutions. This is the Zona Law Group podcast with the experienced attorneys from Zona Law.
Thank you so much for joining us at the Zona Law podcast. And let me say, the eviction moratorium has been extended, and no, this is not an April Fool's joke. I am Mark Zinman. I'm joined here today with Scott Baluha. How you doing, Scott?
Oh, I'm a little bit tired. It's got a lot of new things to discuss, and a lot of changes that have happened as a result of the extension of the CDC moratorium on evictions. And it's a lot of the same old stuff and a little bit of new stuff.
Yeah, and I think it truly came out as a shock yesterday that the CDC moratorium got extended. And so we're kind of just in as much shock, frankly, as our viewers will be, as all of our clients were, as the managers were, that this came out of left field.
Correct. I think the biggest shock that all of us have in the industry is that we essentially have the President of the United States saying, we know that this is unconstitutional, but we're still going to try to encourage the CDC to adopt and extend the moratorium. You know, what are some of the reasons behind that?
Yeah, well, that was the funniest thing. It was Friday of last week. President Biden came out and said the CDC does not have the authority to extend it because of the Supreme Court. It's unconstitutional, therefore go to the legislature. The House tried. They couldn't get the votes together. And basically it ended up back on President Biden's desk, and he said, okay, CDC, go ahead and extend it to 2 months.
Right. It's kind of strange that there'd be such a shift in such a short period of time between, it's okay, but we can all speculate as to the reasons why, but the bottom line really is that they're passing this ball of eviction moratorium back between different branches of the of government. But when it comes down to it, ultimately the legislature should be the one that should be making the decisions about whether any type of laws are passed for any type of moratorium.
Yeah, and this is critical to realize because we keep hearing this question over and over, and I'm sympathetic to clients, isn't this unconstitutional? Absolutely, yes. The Supreme Court basically hinted at that, but they refused to strike it down back in June. And Biden, in his press conference yesterday, basically said, yes, I think this is unconstitutional. I've talked to enough legal scholars that imply that it's unconstitutional, but it won't be reviewed fast enough, and therefore I've got this window where we can try and get out more rental assistance. So it's like, yeah, it's unconstitutional, but it buys us time, so we're going to do it anyways, which to me is shocking.
And really, when you're talking about buying time, it also is buying time when you're talking about the United States Supreme Court, because even though there wasn't a final decision on the constitutionality, there is certainly signaling about the unconstitutionality of it and the fact that, well, it's going to be expiring at the end of July anyway, so we're going to keep our hands off of it. We do wonder whether or not that's going to end up encouraging significantly more litigation over this issue, which is likely to happen.
Yeah, the previous case that went to the Supreme Court, we expect those plaintiffs to refile either a motion for reconsideration with the Supreme Court or a special action to go back in the Supreme Court. We also expect to see across the country numerous new lawsuits pop up because, again, the president acknowledged that it's unconstitutional. So how do you defend that then, from the government side?
One of the ways that they're trying to distinguish this quote-unquote new CDC moratorium from the old one is that now there's a basis to distinguish different areas of the country and say, well, it doesn't apply blanket to everywhere in the United States, just in those places that have substantial community spread of the virus. However, if you take a look at a map that they reference, it's the majority of the country. I think that there's less than 5% or so of the country that would not be protected under the new CDC moratorium.
Yeah, before it was a blanket across the board for every single property in the country if the tenant signed the declaration. Now it has to be within a county that is either a high or a substantial spread rate. But, of course, that covers the entire state of Arizona. It covers more than 90% of the entire country. So, effectively, it's the same thing. And I guess with that, the most common question we get is, well, does the old CDC declaration then apply, or do they have to sign a new one, and is there like a lapse there?
Nope. If they have a CDC declaration that's already in the tenant file, then you're going to want to honor that one. Going forward, there's going to be new CDC declarations that the tenants are going to be signing off on that the CDC will prepare forms for. It doesn't need to be on a CDC form, but the one additional attestation is that I reside in a county that has a high level or substantial community spread of the virus. And again, the question really comes in is, well, let's say that they give me the CDC declaration, and then 2 weeks from now, you're no longer in a county that has that level of community spread. What do you do? That's going to be part of the confusion that's going to need to be resolved in future administrative orders from the Arizona Supreme Court, because without that guidance, we're going to be left in a gray area about what to do.
Yeah, and we don't have a new administrative order yet from the Supreme Court. Our suspicion, of course, is that they'll revert back to where we were effectively a week ago. And in terms of if somebody signs a CDC declaration, they'll probably get a continuation potentially for a bit. You may get your judgment, but the writ date will be struck out. It'll be to be determined. And in those cases where, you believe their statements to be material inaccurate, you could challenge the declaration.
Right. Essentially, the motion to challenge a CDC declaration has to show that the tenant is not seeking rental assistance, that they're not trying, or that they're not using best efforts to make partial payments consistent with their income. So there is a bit of an additional burden on the landlord to put together the documentation necessary to be able to support that, because the burden is on the landlord to be able to show those things. But it's if anybody has been through that process before, it's about gathering the documents, it's about making communication with the tenants, and also encouraging the tenants to seek rental assistance. The number one reason that this moratorium was extended was because there is a lot of money out there for tenants to go and apply for and to get that rental assistance, to get the landlords paid. Without that, then the moratorium would simply just be kicking the can down the road.
Well, I think it is kicking down the can down the road. Let's be honest. I mean, at this point, I think there's somewhere in the range of like $46 or $47 billion in rental assistance that was allocated, some of which started in December of 2020. And now across the country, the estimation is only 7 to 12% of that money has actually been released to landlords. Right. I mean, that's just offensive. I mean, it's just truly the government's not doing their job. If they have this money here to help private individuals and property owners, just get the money out, and it's not being done. So I don't think giving an extra 2 months is going to be the answer unless they entirely change how the money comes out. But I think that's important for the viewers to realize that just because there's an extension of 2 months doesn't mean 2 months is the end of it, does it?
Oh, that's the question, though, because if the rationale behind extending it is to give tenants additional time to fill out the applications, to seek and obtain that rental assistance, then we can all agree that October 3rd, when the moratorium is scheduled to end, well, that should have been sufficient enough time, and that will be the end of it. Well, there is another reason why it was potentially extended that 2 months. What do you think?
I think there's a good chance that the Progressive Party of the branch of the Democratic Party is pushing that Biden's thought was you get 2 months. That'll give them enough time to come back, bring the House back to see if they can get more vote, and then potentially the legislature would looking at doing a moratorium of their own. I mean, you just don't know what's coming. And I think this, to me, truly shocked me. I mean, there's no other way of explaining it. I honestly believed that would be the end of the moratoriums come July 31st. And I think the fact that the CDC had said it was going to be the end, Biden said it was unconstitutional, and they basically just changed their tune entirely, makes you realize that tune could change again. Like, these 2 month steps are never an end. You don't know for sure when it'll end until the Supreme Court steps up and says this is the end.
Agreed, because this has been now the third or fourth extension since the original CDC moratorium went into effect in the beginning of September 4th, 2020. So we can anticipate that it's very possible that it will get extended. That's why landlords have to be even more diligent about staying in communication with their tenants to get these past due balances paid, because your options of trying to get possession of your home or of your apartment back are very limited at this point. Unless you have an issue where there's a non-compliance or criminal activity going on, if it's simply a non-payment of rent, then you have a huge burden to continue to work with the tenants and encourage that rental assistance be sought.
Yeah, and we always encourage that anyways. Like, for those tenants that are working with you, of course work with the tenants. You want them to stay. It's better than the turn. It's better than finding a new tenant. We're talking about those tenants that you've not heard from. Like, I've got clients, single-family owners that haven't been paid since last June. Like, how do you support that? And that's the problem. And I think for here, the strategy moving forward is, at least from my perspective, and you may have a different one, is the clients have to realize there's no guarantee it'll come to the end at the end of October, or then October 3rd. So they may need to take different steps now to say, okay, I need to do something about that CDC declaration because I can't wait for this thing to end because it may not end at any time soon.
Well, if you're a landlord, you can just simply give a month-to-month non-renewal, right? And then that'll resolve the issue?
We don't know that. I assume not. I mean, our Supreme Court has basically said non-renewals are covered by the CDC if the tenant's delinquent in rent. Again, we don't have a new AO yet because today's date is just the day after the CDC order came out. Today's the 4th of August. So we'll get a new administrative order. It'll get into those things, hopefully. My presumption is that we're going to go back to the old status, though, that you can't do non-renewals if the tenant's delinquent, unless it's some other reason.
And I think that that's a fair assumption to make at this point because we really have no other guidance because, again, we're in this uncharted territory where we believed that the moratorium would end, but now it's been revived and extended again with very minor modifications.
And I think that highlights also, maybe people don't realize this. You always hear the legislature going in, making new laws. Generally, those laws don't take place until 90 days after the law is signed into law by the governor. Here, we're getting laws changing day by day, and they take effect immediately. And so it's really just trying to stay on top of these things and figure out what they mean as they come out.
Right, and that's why probably in the next few days or the next week when a new administrative order comes out, you'll be getting new communications from everybody about what that may mean to you and how to address it.
Yeah, so for our clients that are still watching at this point in the podcast, though, because of the changes yesterday, we do have a new form that we require all clients to fill out to complete an eviction based on what we expect to be required from the courts. So make sure you get that from our office. Until then, though, as the new stuff comes out, we will update you here on the Zona Law podcast. And thank you for being here, Scott.
Thank you.